Hey YouTube, Robe here with a review of the S.H.Figuarts Kamen Rider Wizard Flame Style from Kamen Rider Wizard, obviously, along with the first release bonus, maybe, of the Kamen Rider Wizard Strike Wizard Robe. So you get a new little robe piece thingy for it, so that's a thing. Quick look at this box. It is black and white and red all over. Nope. Just shows you how to work it. Flame Styles box is actually pretty nice. In fact, it's my favorite thing about this toy, is the box. Jewel, Rider, very cool, like ring-esque opening here. There is red tints throughout that to make it look like a jewel. Very cool looking. And the figure looks a lot better from the pictures than it does in person. Go figure. So you got a little window there with Flame Style on it. And it's a nice little matte finish on the box too. Very, very cool. So like I said, I love the box quite a bit. And here's the figure. Yep. Okay, so where to begin? Okay, so, yeah. Apparently he's like Mary Poppins. And he can fly or something. It looks like a dress. If you compare the suit on the show, and that pops off all the time, that's just going away. If you compare the suit on the show with this figure, you'll notice that he looks like he's got like super hips. Like he's some sort of weird model that's got this really tiny waistline, but then like their butt and hip area is just like, it's a lot like that. It's a really poofy cape piece that ends up looking like garbage, in my opinion. Even when you bring it as close as you can, then first of all, it does really look like a dress. And then two, his waistline up here is still so small that it still looks wrong. And then back here, it is open, which I don't mind, but it just ends up looking very sloppy in the end. It does free up articulation quite a bit, but it sacrifices look for articulation, and that's something I don't particularly enjoy. The WizarDriver pops off like no other. I would have rather have seen just a simple mold right here that was all together, and then you could turn it. That would have been a lot easier. Not really easier to implement, but a lot safer to implement, because now you've got this big WizarDriver that just has tendencies of falling off whenever you try to do something with the toy. And then to top it off, it's so big and clunky that it ends up clashing with his incredibly small waistline, and it fell off again. So there's that. What else don't I like about this figure? The proportions are very off. Like I said, you've got this really thin waistline because of the way they wanted to implement the ab crunch. I'm all for an ab crunch, but when it ends up looking like this guy's got like giant breasts, or just like is anorexic, or something's going on in his life that's just really bad, and it ends up looking so awful. It's so thin right here compared to the upper part of the torso, that there's just something wrong with it when you look at it from the side here. When you look at it from the front, it doesn't look as bad because you can't tell how thin this is. But if you tilt it at all, you start getting into some really weird territory. The arm articulation's fine. I'm completely fine with the way the shoulder pad is molded and everything like that. In fact, the shoulder pad is painted very nice, sculpted really nice, and I do love that. So that's a plus about the figure. I like the head sculpt. I think the head itself is actually really nice. It's got this nice glittery, wow, more of a shiny, not glittery, compound to it, and that looks very nice at the end result. I think his chin is a little effed up. I think it comes up just a little too much, and the chin part here, right down here, kind of comes up a little bit too much. It should be a little bit more flush, as you can kind of see right here. Right along here, it should be a little bit more rounded down here. So while it comes up enough, I just feel like it should be a little bit more rounded down here. Kind of, if you look at him at certain angles, it looks like he's got a Leno chin going on. And that's really kind of strange. The chest parts that don't like severely overlap each other and look weird are very nicely done. They have the same compound effect as the head sculpt, and that's really nice, so I don't mind that at all. Wonderful from the back, obviously. The belt itself has 3 generic spell rings. Those aren't detailed, but of course you can see the water, hurricane, and land rings on there too, and an empty space for the flame ring that's on his finger. So those are nice. The belt's nicely done. The rings itself are very, very strange. They're very large. Particularly, not so much this one, because those are rather thick, but the spell rings, they end up looking like he's got some sort of weird like shock ring on his hand. They're very, very large. It looks like 2 of them stacked on top of each other. And when you compare it to the WAP figure, which we'll take a look at in a second, it just ends up looking like he's got this weird like weapon on his middle finger, and it really ends up looking strange. So I'm not a fan of how they molded the rings. Beast's prototypes have popped up since he's on sale now for pre-order, coming out in June, I believe. His rings look to be a lot more proportional. Hopefully Flame Dragon's is too, to the toy, so there's that. His feet are huge as well. Unproportionably huge compared to the body. I think they end up looking like weird Dumbo feet. According to my girlfriend, one feet's bigger than the other, which is actually, I think, true. I think this one's bigger than that one, so he's got that going on. There's just so many flaws with this figure that it's just really, really a disappointment. Once again, here he is next to the WAP figure. So the WAP figure, if I can actually stand him up straight, stand you up straight, there we go. The WAP figure is taller. The helmet does look a little bit weird for him, but I feel like it's a little bit more accurate. This bump needs to go up just a tiny bit more, and this one a tiny bit less. And this head is small, of course, but I think it ends up looking like a nicer proportion than this one does. This one does not have an ab crunch. It just has a swivel. It does have the light up gimmick, obviously. For a more detailed review of this, check out my WAP figure review. Shoulder pads aren't painted, but that's something you could probably pull off with a black wash if you really wanted to. The rings are all generic in this, so you don't get the style rings. And it's molded into the coat. But that's some sacrifices I think you're willing to make if you want a figure that looks nicer. Overall, I just think the WAP figure is a little bit more affordable, a lot easier to find, and it ends up looking like a much more proportioned figure, and I just like the way that the coat's sleeker and everything. And it's still pliable. You don't particularly lose out on any articulation by having the coat like this. So there really wasn't a need for the cut in the coat on the figure art, I think, back there. And it's almost the same joint system down here. It's a little bit better on the figure art. So if you're willing to sacrifice the articulation and the lack of movable belt, I think the WAP figure is actually a better choice, I think. I just really don't like the way that this figure looks in general. But enough about how awful he looks. And onto his accessories. He does come with a number of hands, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hands. Right down here, as well as the WizarSwordGun in sword mode, gun mode, an additional belt, and the WizarDriver with the hand facing the other way. The WizarSwordGun is kind of cool. It would have been neat if they implemented a transformation, but it's alright that they didn't. I don't really mind. You got the nice clear barrel right here, and the gun hand does open, which I think is really nice as well. So, I feel it's almost worth the figure to get these to go to your WAP figure, because the one that comes with the WAP figure is pretty awful. But this is actually a very nice weapon mold. Like I said, the other WizarDriver piece that just fits in right here, right where the other driver piece went, except it just doesn't stay in good as well either. The driver is nicely molded, nicely painted. If you can get in there and see it right there, you can even see the magical circle in the hand, which is great as well. So they put a lot of detail into these accessories and stuff. It's just kind of depressing that, like, certain things are just so bad about this figure. You also get an additional robe piece for some splayed open, like a tacky effect moving thing. So you got that. And then you got a Tamashii stage, which looks gorgeous. Kamen Rider Wizard Flame style. This is a beautiful, beautiful Tamashii stage. And one of the highlights of the figure for me. I don't particularly like Tamashii stages. I hardly ever use Tamashii stages. But I like collecting the customized bases and using them as just a base for the figure. Without the full stand, and or just like putting them up behind the figures is a nice little thing to do as well. And this is just a great, great looking stand. And of course, the Strike Wizard Robe piece is a lot like this piece, except it's splayed open because he's supposed to be doing the kick strike. So that's actually how we're going to pose him. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. When you put him in a kick strike pose, or even a more action-orientated pose, the figure's flaws kind of get hidden away a little bit. The thickness of the robe's hip piece area right around here is obviously whisked away because it's like flooshed open. That's not a word, but the largeness of the WizardDriver is still obviously present, but it covers up how thin the midriff section is. So again, that's a little bit of a plus for a pose like this. The head being as big as it is compared to the body is still kind of present, but with his head tilted like that, his whole lack of neck thing kind of gets hidden away because you really wouldn't see the neck at an angle like that. So having it in a kick strike pose, the figure is kind of improved a little bit because the flaws are hidden. But of course, having a figure to where you need to have it in one kind of pose in order to hide the fact that it's actually kind of awful doesn't really make it a good figure. I like some of the things it does. I like the head sculpt for what it is. I like the detail of the weapons. I like the switchable robes. I think that's actually kind of cool for a more actiony effect. And I like just how detailed the belt and stuff is. For a playable figure, for something that's like kind of fun to play with, obviously you want the WAP figure. It's more accurate to the show in terms of proportions. The rings don't look absolutely thick. The light up gimmick is actually kind of fun. And I just think it's an overall better toy than the figure. So if you're on the fence about which one to get, I would go for the WAP figure. Not only that, all of the WAP toys are retail releases. All of the other dragons and all the other styles that aren't Flame are going to be Tamashii Web Exclusives, meaning they're not going to run cheap. You can probably get this guy for about $2,500. But the other guys, you're probably not going to find much cheaper than $3,500, maybe even $4,000, depending on how popular they are. Whereas the WAP figures go from anywhere to $1,500 to $2,000. So the WAP figures are a lot more affordable. You can buy them all at retail, and they'll all create a coherent display. Whereas you can get a Figuart and then get the other WAP figures, and they don't really look alike, and then the WAP figures start showing up the Figuarts because the Figuart's kind of awful. I really don't like this figure. So if you have a preference, you have a choice, I would go for the WAP figure. There's just so many flaws with the Figuart mold that it's just between the head and the midriff and the skirt piece and the rings on the fingers. The kick strike robe doesn't even come with hands for a kick strike. You always get stuck with driver on rings, so that's kind of obnoxious too. There's just a lot of flaws with the figure. I feel like it was rushed, or it really wasn't rushed either. It's just something is really wrong with it, and I don't really like the end product. So I'm definitely going to be a huge advocate of the WAP series on this one. It's just so much more worth it to me to pick up a more affordable, slightly more accurate looking to the show figure. There's been a lot of cool customs using the Figuart with the WAP body, because apparently they can open up and change the joints and stuff because the Japanese are smart people. And it actually looks incredible. You lose the ab crunch, but you get a amazing looking figure. Whereas just the way that ab crunch was forced into the figure by making the midriff so tiny is just really obnoxious. And I think that's the biggest ruiner of the figure to me. So I'm going to stop ranting and just let it go. Hopefully Flame Dragon is better and they fix a lot of the problems with the mold, because I am really looking forward to Flame Dragon and Beast coming out. So hopefully those don't carry the same problems that this guy does. Great weapons, horrible figure. That's pretty much sums it up. So you can check out shukinshobe.com for the latest updates on my reviews and hauls, and of course check out Riders, Rangers, and Rambles, the podcast bringing the latest token news in the craziest way possible. And of course you can buy this guy, more Kamen Rider Wizard merchandise, more figure arts, and more importantly, the WAP series figures at cstoysjapan.com. So take care and have a great one. Bye.